This video is going to cover file management and how to organize your project. In the initial setup, there's a start job program that will create folders, and in these folders are going to be these different files. There's several MicroStation files with the .dgn extension. That is their specific file extension, is .dgn. There'll also be a GPK and an ITL. Okay, so our initial setup, you'll get all these different files, and we're going to go through each one of these files and talk about the importance of them. The first file we'll talk about is the existing terrain file. This 3D file is created by survey to include the existing terrain boundary. This file is referenced by civil geometry corridors file and the cross-section file. The terrain is important for us to be able to get the surface out there so we can utilize the existing surface. And you can see in the image over here on the right side that there's just a boundary, an existing boundary. In Chapter 1 of the Road 1 manual, you would learn how to turn on the contours or the triangles for the surface and other things as well. Road 2 covers the advanced terrain modeling chapter, actually covers more ways to edit the surface or the terrain and some other functions that are in there as well. So that's what the existing terrain file is for. The survey topo file, this 3D file contains any existing elements such as alignments, pavements, shoulders, any shots that the survey goes out and gets for the project. Okay, the files may be referenced into the corridors file, and the only reason to be referenced into the corridors file is for the corridor or the template to target existing elements that are out there, which would be like an edge of shoulder or edge of pavement, or maybe a flow line for a ditch or whatnot. So this survey topo file is separate from the terrain file, but they are both 3D surface files. The civil geometry file, this is a 2D file to include any horizontal and vertical geometry such as main alignments, ramps, side roads, etc. This file contains any kind of alignment, and you're talking about not like edge of pavements. Those go somewhere else. These are specifically for your alignments or any kind of roadway that you're going to use as a center line, your baseline. Okay, and it's referenced by about everything: corridors, cross-section file, super elevation file, land boundary file, plan profile file. This is one of your important files, and nothing else goes in this file. We only want to see our horizontal alignments, ramps, side roads, that stuff, and in there you can create your profiles off of that, and that is it. We don't want anything else in there, or else we start running into issues. So that's what the civil geometry is all about, the backbone. Now the plan file is a 2D file that contains any edges of pavements or edges of shoulders that will be used for targeting by the template. So if there's anything that you're running, as an example, we have a 12 foot lanes here on each side of this center line. Maybe you wanted to go out to 24. Well, this is the file where you would come out and create these elements that you'd want to target with the correct feature definition, and then in your template you would target those lines that come out to 24 foot or whatever you have them at. So those type of lines that you'd want to target would go into this plan file. Okay, so even like if you were creating maybe a ditch out here that you want to target, you would create it in this plan file so that you can utilize it. And there's more that you can see or read on or watch through the videos that we have out there in Chapter 4 of the Road 1 manual. The profile file is a 2D file that contains any profiles generated for the plan profile sheet generation tool. Okay. This file will contain reference files, the civil geometry or corridors file as a reference, you don't want to place the profiles over the project. So what it's saying here is we normally reference in the civil geometry, and in this way, when we use the old tool to create our profiles, which is the old DNC Manager tool, it'll plot graphics of your profiles off to the side. So this profile here came with this short alignment here, and this longer profile came with this longer alignment over here. And so by referencing this in, we don't inadvertently place this on top of the alignment. So we push it, put it in here, and we move it off to the side, and then we populate our profiles. Okay, and more of that's covered in the Road 1 Manual, Chapter 4. The land boundary file. This 2D file contains any right-of-way elements for the project. Also some utilities, like if you had some stuff over here, you can see right now there's a right-of-way line over here. And what this file is designed to do is we put all these lines in this file so it doesn't make a mess out of our plan file and out of our civil geometry file. This is designated for any time that we want to have cross sections later on, our dynamic cross sections, and you want to see labels in those cross sections of where these pieces of right of way or some utilities are located on your cross section. So what you'd do is you'd come in here and you'd have this right of way line. You would make sure that your terrain is active. You would open a profile window to this line that you create in here representing the right of way, and then you get the heads up display of it. You select it, heads up display, open up the profile window, and in that profile window you can make the profile that comes across that's the existing ground, you can make it active. And then when you cut cross sections, as long as you use the proper feature definition, this will give you a label in your cross section file off that baseline. It'll give you that label of right of way. Or if you had any of the other utilities, there's a lot of different lines that we have for that so that you can put labels in cross sections, but that's basically what this land boundary file is for. It's a way of separating things so that not everything's in one or two files. The corridors file is a very important file. This 2D file contains the corridor for the project. There may be one or more corridors per project depending on the need, and you might have 2 or 3 in one file. It just all depends. But the corridor file has template drops in it, and you can look at this picture over here, and you'll see there's a corridor, and it's a green shape with these little handles coming off of it, and you'll see green lines cutting across. Those green lines represent a template drop, and so a template gets dropped in here representing the highway, and you can see what it looks like over on the right screen. So this one's got pavement, maybe a little bit of shoulder, and then it's got an end condition to it. So a corridor will control all this. It'll have all this information about our corridor. You don't want to plot anything else in this corridors file. You don't want to cut cross sections in here. That's a big no-no. The corridors file is your meat and potatoes of the whole program and your whole project. And what will happen is if another piece of the GeoPack tools goes corrupt or has issues, it will affect your corridors, which is really bad. So corridors file should have just itself in it. This files will contain reference files of existing terrain. You have to have it, and the civil geometry, which is also very important because we build the corridor off the civil geometry. And you won't see end conditions if you don't have your existing terrain. So you have to have the existing terrain in here, have to have it active, and then you can move on. And there's possibly other corridor files that you would have referenced in as well. So if you had another alignment coming off, maybe an intersection or something, somebody else is working on another alignment, you would have theirs referenced in, and then we would use clipping tools and target aliasing to make that all work good together. This file will be referenced by the cross-section file and possibly other corridors files as well. So that's the corridors file, and really you don't want to have any other operations in there other than corridor operations. The plan and profile file is a 2D file that is used to create full plan sheets, plan sheets, plan profile sheets, and profile sheets, or possibly full profile sheets, so it covers all of them. This is done by using the older legacy GeoPack tools as outlined in Chapter 11 of the Road 1 manual. So that's where you get the information on this, and all this is doing is placing shapes out here and then cutting sheets off of it. But you really want to have its own plan profile file for this. Super elevation file is a standalone file as well. It's a 2D file. It contains the super elevation section and shapes for the alignment in which the super elevation is being calculated. This file will only need the civil geometry referenced into it in order to select from the alignment to build. So what this tool is saying is that you got to have an alignment to select, and you build the super elevation off of that. And that's all that'll be in here. And you'll see a section which is represented by these green lines in here, and then you see shapes in here which represent our super elevation. You see the colorization changing as it goes through the curves. This file will be referenced into the corridors file and used to apply super elevation to the corridor. So you create this in the super elevation file, you reference the super elevation file into the corridors file, you take your corridor and you attach the super elevation to it. You calculate it with it. Cross-section file. This is a 2D file used to create cross-sections of the project. Reference files will be corridors and is needed to show the proposed data. Civil geometry, cross-sections are created from an alignment, so you have to select the alignment which is contained in that civil geometry file. Existing terrain, you need the terrain to be active, that way you'll get your 3D model activated and everything that's being shown is in that 3D model. So, and then land boundary to show any right-of-way labels or utilities or whatever you've got in there. So if you have some, you'd want that attached to your cross-section file. It says no cross-section model will include items that are in a 3D model at the time of creation. So when you run that tool, it looks into that 3D model and everything that's in there will get reproduced in the cross-section. So if you had stuff in 2D that wasn't in 3D, you want to make sure it is. The best way to do that is you reference everything into the 2D file. You make the terrain active, which creates that 3D model in the background. And then you can hit the F6 key and you can see the 2D model on the left side and the 3D model on the right side. And you can compare and see and make sure everything that's in that 3D model is what you want. This is covered in the Road 1 manual, Chapter 9, and also in the Road 2 manual in the chapter titled End Area Volumes. Graphical filters file. This is a 3D file used for creating a 3D surface of the project for electronic deliverables. This is where you take your proposed surface, you can create it, and you're good to go. Send it off, and there's a lot of instructions on that. This file will make use of a corridor referenced into this file to create the proposed surface. You can see in Road 2 manual, the advanced terrain modeling has a lot of, well, I guess it's 4 different ways of doing graphical filter or create a surface for your graphic filters file, which is for the electronic deliverables. And that's all in Road 2. The template library, which is the ITL. This is a storage container for templates of a project. Contains templates that represent the dynamic typical sections, contains the MoDOT standard templates. With the introduction of SS4, the templates are stored in a DGN file, but can also be stored in the template library. And on that note is you can once you place it in the DGN file, once you've dropped a corridor in with the template, you can go out and you can select the purple magenta line representing that template drop, and you can edit it in that file, in the DGN file. You don't have to go back to the library, edit it, and then populate it back out. Now some people do like that workflow, but a lot of times you don't want to mess with that original template. So you could do the template editing in the DGN file, and if you wanted to keep those edits, you can send them back using the ITL template library organizer tool. Using the template library organizer will allow users to copy templates from other template libraries or the DGN file itself, just like I was saying. And there's more information on this in the Road 1 manual, chapter 5. The GPK file. This file is a database file, and it contains coordinate geometry elements as in alignment, profile, point, curve, information, etc. that goes along with your alignments and your profiles, big time. All of it has to be stored in there. This is an older legacy file that is still needed for producing plan and profile sheets. It's the only way we can actually populate the plan profile sheets is to have that GPK attached to the tool that has the alignments in it. And this file will be done away with the release of Open Roads Designer Connected Edition, which it'll be really nice to not have to go back to the GPK file. And this another note on the GPK file is the naming convention. There's a PowerPoint out there talking about all the naming convention for the GPK, and if you go larger than 15 characters on your alignment, or if you add special characters, it's not going to work for you. Also, if you were naming a profile, no more than 8 characters, and again, no special characters, no spaces, none of that stuff for the GPK file. It is an older file. Multiple users. In the case of multiple users working on the same project, here are a couple things to follow. A folder can be created for each alignment with profiles as needed. One folder being assigned to each user, but having references back and forth to each other's files. Referencing of the civil geometry file should be utilized. So what this is saying, copying the file from the original location to the user's folder is not a good workflow. So if something happens, maybe we have to raise the profile for the project. And if you go in and do it, the one that's back in the data folder where it originally was created gets changed, but the one that the user has copied out into their folder is not changed. It's not dynamic and not linked. So what happens is the profile adjustment doesn't show up, and then the information is going to be incorrect. So the best way to do that is to, if you're working on a corridor, you have your corridors file, you reference in that civil geometry file from that data folder and go from there. The path to the GPK will need to be defined when working outside the folder containing the GPK. And this usually applies to the plan sheets. This can be done through the user preferences. So in the user preferences, you would right click in a blank area and hold for a second, go to user preferences, and then go to the job number and path that to where that GPK is located. And that way it sees it and you'll be able to work with it. That's the biggest things on that multiple user thing. Multiple sessions is not worth doing at this time in SS4. All kinds of issues happen. Some people use them and they've used up to 3 different sessions and gotten away with it for a little bit, but eventually it comes back to haunt you. So but Bentley has strongly urged that there's no more than 1 session of MicroStation open while you're working. So that's what the rule is on that. And that will conclude the file management video.